Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I hope that all of you are doing well. I'm Dominik Blattner, the ITTF High Performance Manager, and I'm very happy and proud to warmly welcome all of you to our 31 ITTF High Performance and Development webinar with the great topic, General Consideration for Sports Nutrition. I want to talk shortly about our webinar code of the Q&A. Please leave your questions in the Q&A section, and our guest, Petra, will try to answer as many as possible in the question and answer part of the webinar. Thank you very much for taking care of this. And now over to the introduction of our guest for today. I would like to warmly welcome Associate Professor Dr. Petra Zaletel from Slovenia. She was educated at the Faculty of Sport in Ljubljana. She did there the diploma, the master's, and the PhD. She's an associate professor in the Department of Dance and Aerobic and Fitness. Her research work is on physical preparation, sports performance, sports nutrition, and sports injuries. She was a former acrobatic rock and roll dancer over 10 years. 2 times she won the national championships, and she took the 11th place at the European Championships. And last but not least, she works in wellness studios on programs of physical preparation and nutrition consulting. So thank you very much for taking the time, Petra. It's nice to meet you and see you.
Yes, nice to meet you too. Thank you for invitation, and hope to get as many information as you need to be a good nutritionist for your sport.
Thank you very much for your welcoming words, Petra. And as all of you are aware, we, the ITTF HPD, tries to cover all the different pillars of the performance. So not just the technical and tactical parts, but also the conditioning, the sport psychology. And this time we will bring you a new topic, and will be the sports nutrition, which is also a very important part in the life, not just from professional sportsmen, but in general. And we are very much motivated and looking forward to your presentation, Petra. But before you will start with your presentation, I would like to warmly welcome the well-experienced and well-known ITTF High Performance Elite Coach Massimo. My dear colleague, pass over to you.
Thank you, Dominik. Thanks again as usual, and thank you, Petra, for taking the time to share with us your knowledge, which we consider very important for different aspects. If some of you may remember that this summer we have had some lessons in table tennis, and then I said in one of those lessons that nutritional aspects is very important, and I said that it should be one of the staff member, I would say, for the highest performance in table tennis. So today we have the great opportunity to have some general consideration regarding the nutritional elements in general and in table tennis also. And I think it's important to educate our young players to eat properly and to have some basic knowledge of what is good and what is not good, what is more functional for us. So today we have Petra can share with us a great presentation. I saw the presentation before starting this webinar, and I'm sure you will like it. So Petra, as we used to say, the screen is yours. Normally the floor is yours, but this time the screen is yours. Please go ahead and have a good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I will start to share the screen. And start with my presentation. Is that all right? We hear each other and we see the presentation.
All good.
Yes,
all good. Okay. All good. Go ahead. Thank you.
All the best.
So Yes, so like Dominic and Massimo said, nutrition is very important in our lives, not just in sport performance, but also for our health and for our, also if you want, functionality of the body, shape, aesthetics, and also the most important thing is health, of course, but we will talk today about some general consideration in sport nutrition. So adequate nutrition is, of course, essential to fitness and performance. So for athletes competing, foods eaten in preparation for competition can mean the difference between victory and defeat. Many times we see that now also, for example, I'm sure you know, tennis player Djokovic, when he changed, he was already successful, but when he changed details in his food preparation, nutrition, diet, he became even more successful. So at the end, at the peak of the sport performance, I'm sure that nutrition is 70% of our success. Before, when we are physically inactive, there is more percent of activity, which is important to reach some level of successfulness. But later on, where we are already very high in sport performance, then I think nutrition is the key factor to make peak success. So we can choose in our nutrition for adequate sources. The macronutrients, which you all know, that those are carbohydrates, proteins, and fat, and micronutrients, vitamins and minerals, and of course water, which is very important for hydration and all metabolism of fat, carbs and proteins. Of course, water must be enough of water. We should consume enough of water to be functional in our bodies. So a few, three dietary guidelines that we should consider are variety of food sources. So this is very important, because if we have a large variety of food sources and we have sufficient amount of all required nutrients, then we don't need any supplements. But that is very rarely that we have variety and that we like everything in our nutrition, of course. There should be also balance, so proportionality. We have to consume enough of each type of food, because if we don't consume enough of fat or enough of proteins or enough of carbs, body will choose from other sources to put it in that position of use. So balance also refers to matching energy intake, of course, calories consumed with calories burned. That is, of course, weight management. We all know that, but today's we can also consider some general considerations for weight management, but I will take this lecture more into sport nutrition. And moderation is another guideline, so not consuming too much of a particular food. That means probably this highest peak of the mountain, so sugars and simple carbohydrates. If we take a look at this pyramid, you see at the bottom there is physical activity. So the most of all, we have to have most of physical activity, and then water, drinking water during the day, all the time, especially when needs are bigger than usual, normal, every day. Then now we have here, you see my pointer, yes? We have legumes, fruits, vegetables, so minerals and vitamins, and a lot of fibers. Then this is the place which was before in older pyramids at the bottom. So we have whole grains, a lot of carbohydrates, rice, bread, potatoes, pasta, and then we have above this is meat, fish, dairy products. So we have more protein part, and then fat part with unsaturated fat with omega-3 and 6. You see oils, nuts, and then the peak, we should consume less of these products, which are sweets and ice cream, cookies, so on. The good stuff, I would say. So healthy diet should contain, now here in general, we see the most carbohydrates, somewhere from 45% to 60%, and even to 70% in high intensity exercise. With low glycemic index, we'll talk about that later. So these are some pictures. Proteins with high biological value, also we'll talk about that later. So high biological value, eggs have the highest biological value. Non-saturated fat, that is omega-3 and 6, and a lot of fibers. So we consume only 15 grams of fibers per day. We should consume somewhere around 30 to 40 fibers, but not in front of competition because of intestinal gases and maybe stomach ache. That's another problem. We'll also talk about that. And of course, water, as mentioned before. So now we will take a look at carbohydrates as macronutrient which we should consume the most. So the main role of carbohydrates is to provide energy, especially during high intensity exercise, but also during aerobic exercise, because body doesn't use only carbohydrates for high intensity, but for every movement. So its primary source of energy are carbohydrates. Even though we have aerobic exercise at the beginning, carbs are primary source of energy. And if low intensity is past around 15-20 minutes, then we get to fat as a primary source of energy, but carbs are still in use. So up to 70% of energy can come from fat, but carbs are always a source of energy for the body movement. So energy from glucose in blood and breakdown in the muscle or liver glycogen ultimately powers contractile processes of all our muscles. All other roles are also listed below, but this is for us, this is the main purpose of carbohydrates, to support us with energy from glycogen, which is stored in livers and muscles. First, consuming food rich in complex carbohydrates and fibers is one of the most important components of a healthy diet, and also I think the most important for athletes. So we have two kinds of carbs, simple, which are candies, cookies, cakes, as mentioned before, monosaccharides and disaccharides, depending on their structures, of course, and complex and less processed carbohydrates, which are not so sweet, but are very good for our nutrition, whole grains, vegetables, legumes. These complex carbohydrates also are divided in oligosaccharides, polysaccharides. That's not so important because this is the form of them, but it's important where we can find them. So in cabbage, broccoli, asparagus, other vegetables, whole grains, polysaccharides, which are even better in starch, wheat, rice, potatoes, root crops, legumes, peas and beans. So you see whole grains and also plant food. And fibers cannot be digested by human enzymes. No sugar is absorbed from them. Fibers contribute very little or no energy, but they're very good for emptying the big intestine and to put all toxins out of our body. So they're very important. Fibers exist in plants like oats, apples, shelf of apples or other fruits, beans, seaweed, also rye, bran, broccoli, and the food you have on pictures. Now, stored form of glucose is glycogen. It provides more than a half of all energy used by brain, muscles, and other tissues. and food rich with carbs, especially plant food. Only exception is lactose from milk, so this is sugar which is in milk. It's and a small amount of glycogen from animals. So this is only exception where glycogen comes from animal source, not plant source. And in our countries, developed countries, 2/3 of energy is represented in our diet by carbohydrates. In poorer countries, there is, I think, around half of their diet is are carbs, or even less. So that's not so good. So glycogen reserves are stored in livers and in muscles. So you see on the picture around 500 grams, but for athletes it's up to 900 grams because they have bigger muscles, of course. 1 gram of carbohydrate contains about 4 kilocalories. This is just for comparison to fat, which 1 gram of fat contains 9 kilocalories. Just to see how our energy is stored in our body. But here, maybe very important is this for athletes, so that the amount of glycogen stored in muscle can be temporarily increased by the diet and exercise regimen called carbohydrate loading, or supercompensation of carbohydrate. That is very good to know. So before long competitions where we have a lot of opponents in your sport, I would say, we can use this carbohydrate loading to be really, really energetic when we come on the competition, and that this energy lasts till the end of the competition, we should say till the final, where the most energy should be produced, okay? So before you saw some numbers, researchers are leaving us with different numbers, but for carbohydrate intake, we should say that sedentary lifestyle, someone should, their diet should compose of around 45 to 50% of carbohydrates, but for regularly active people and very intensive activity, it should be higher. So around 60 or even 70%, depends on activity. So for example, for conditional preparations in some environment where we have twice per day, where training sessions are twice per day, of course, carbohydrates should be very high, up to 70%. Here are also where the highest calories from carbohydrate came from. So around 75% of calories come from carbohydrates in these foods, so rice, bread, noodles, cornflakes, and calories, so moderate calories from carbohydrates comes also from this kind of food, mostly plant food. And at the end, I don't know if you see this one, so nearly no carbohydrates comes from beef, eggs, poultry, fish, vegetable oil, butter, margarine. These are some nutritions where there is no carbs. Okay, why we should eat enough carbohydrates? Because this is very important for athletes. Because if we have enough carbohydrates in our stores, this prevents the breakdown of proteins for energy needs, because the body wants to use proteins for other things, for building and maintaining muscles, for other functions, not for energy source. But if there is not enough carbs, then the body will use protein, and it is not good when our athletes are in adolescence or under 25 years of age. They should contain proteins for their muscle growth and for their recovery, regeneration of muscles. And if there is not enough carbs, this happens. So proteins are breakdown for energy. Also, if we don't eat enough carbs, body is forced in gluconeogenesis. That is a process where in liver, so breakdown of proteins into amino acids in livers. so that they can be used for energy. Also, if this starvation is continued, lack of proteins is seen in weakness, poor body functions, poor coordination, fatigue, and everything else. And carbs are also very necessary to metabolize fat. So a small amount of carbs must be available also for fat metabolism. So you see the importance of carbs. Now, you probably all heard about glycemic response and glycemic index, which we use, this term we use with carbohydrates. What is this? So glycemic response it means how quickly blood glucose level rise after a meal. So if we eat food with high glycemic index, for example, white bread or cakes also, or very soft and sweet banana, not green, that one which is very soft. So it has got high glycemic index. That means that the sugar all the sugar from this food comes to our bloodstream, and insulin, which is the hormone which is dealing with sugar, rises in our bloodstream. So we can see this picture, and then we come back to the previous one. So see, if we eat, for example, breakfast like this, we have a lot of calories but not so much energy. Our blood sugar rises, our insulin rises, and then the consequence is that this insulin take blood sugar and put it into the muscles. So at first minute, 2 minutes, 3